Um, Kevin, if really happy to have you here, and you should be able to start sharing your screen here. If you don't mind introducing yourself to the group, we'll um, do about 15 minutes or so of presentation, and then about the same for Q&A. And yeah, we'll give
Okay,
you the
great.
mic, Kevin. Thanks.
I am going to try my best to multitask as I share my screen and start this guy. Can everybody see that within reason? All right. So I'm Kevin. I am my background in a nutshell is I was a high velocity digital marketer and brand owner for a number of years. I used to buy patents, build a bunch of brands, sell stuff online. It drove me into machine learning in terms of high velocity marketing attribution. So I developed an interest in machine learning from that and from my own brands. I had the fortune to sell those brands back in 2019, and I leaned into founder, CEO, and board coaching and advisory services. And naturally, between the machine learning and the coaching, with all of the movements in generative AI, I dove in with both arms and both feet to really explore the future of how all of this was going to work. This presentation is part of a presentation I can talk to for almost 5 hours. So I'm going to move pretty quickly through this stuff so that we can get to a Q&A. And we're assuming that everybody has a decent idea of what we're talking about with LLMs and generative AI. If you're not up to speed on that, as Taylor said, check out some of my content on LinkedIn. I try and be very approachable and very practical with little short snippets of information that I put out. But the goal here is to put forward a number of playbooks that you can be considering within your organization. Every one of these is its own rabbit hole that you can go down and chase, and they don't all fit all organizations of all sizes. But in my workshopping and advisory, these are the types of things that I'm seeing proactive organizations leap in now. The very first thing that everybody needs to be doing, and this is probably the most important slide that I do, is just to use it. I can't tell you how often I'll go into a workshop of 30 or 40 different executives and I'll do a pre-survey about who's using these tools. And sure, a lot of people have played with tools. And then I ask, who's actually paying for one of these tools? And almost all the hands shoot down. So number one, within your organization and personally, you need to select a tool and you need to be using it, because the only way that you're truly going to understand the boundaries of what these tools can do is by directing about 10 hours of your time into a tool like GPT or Claude or Gemini, which is the Google model as well, and seeing where its limitation lies. The related point is setting the context of how you're actually using it. And this is a point where a lot of people get a little bit confused and a little bit disappointed with the tools. That the idea is that the LLMs themselves have the entire sum of human knowledge that are basically contained in that blue ball that I have over here. What you are as a professional is contained in that smaller yellow circle. And the then intersection between the two is where I encourage people to spend most of their time, because we all know that these tools they can hallucinate, they can flat out put out bad facts, like just bad information. So all of us have our own expertise. I'm a really solid digital marketer, but I don't know a lot about thoracic surgery, right? So although I can go to the tool and I can ask it questions about thoracic surgery, I have no way of validating the response. I might learn something about thoracic surgery, but it's not really going to amplify my output. Now, however, if I'm operating on that Venn intersection between the zones, this is the opportunity where I can amplify what I'm doing and use the tool really as a partner. So the first playbook is to get out there and actually just use it and encourage your teams to use it. GPT Teams, if you're not aware of it, has a $25 a month subscription that allows you to centralize it within your organization, control some access, and also it limits data porosity back into the model, which is a known problem. Then the next play, and this is the most obvious, I'm a marketer, I'm a bunch of CMOs and people on here. The ability to create multimodal content is absolutely astonishing. As far as doing vlogs, video, audio, visual pieces. This is a Hey Jen avatar. This is my friend Eric. Listen for the Minnesota accent and recognize that Eric is not real.
Now we live in Park City, Utah. We moved there 3 years ago. Nous avons déménagé là-bas parce que nous aimons vraiment les montagnes.
What's amazing to me about that is that Minnesota accent actually conveys through. But think about the ways within an onboarding experience, within a customer service experience, that you might be able to deploy an avatar such that you can scale human elements within your business. All right, automating of sales. This applies in direct consumer, B2B, whatever it is. The bar continues to rise on what it means to do cold outreach. And there's the amount of information that's out there on all of us as business leaders is absolutely tremendous. And you're no longer going to get away with cold email, like mail merge type tools anymore. Increasingly, you're going to see highly targeted, highly specific, tailored email campaigns that pull out your URL, pull out what you're doing, and have a very well tailored message for you. That's all completely doable. It's kind of half baked in most of the CRMs at the moment, but there are a bunch of different ways, sort of hackery ways, that you can make this happen in terms of cold outreach, such that you can scale that and make your marketing far, far more personal. Data. I'm a data guy. I love data. It's super fun. There's so much that you can do with data as far as essentially bypassing the traditional like data stack. In larger organizations that I work with, a typical issue is that some business leader wakes up at 2 o'clock in the morning and they think, oh my gosh, I have this really cool idea. There's something I really want to get out of the data stack, but they don't really have access to it. So they end up going through a data analytics project queue. That data analyst has to restructure all the data and run the query. 2 weeks goes by, and then the response comes out the other end, and the business leader is inevitably like, yeah, there was nothing there, and I just wasted a ton of time. So they often don't ask that question anymore. Now we have the ability to ask those questions. This is a real example that I pulled from my work with a big D2C company that takes unstructured customer data. In this case, they send soups. This is a Salt Lake-based company that sends sympathy soups. And each product comes out with a gift note associated with it. That's unstructured data that would be really hard to get to. But since they send tens of thousands of orders out that all have that gift information, I had a hypothesis that that people were buying certain types of products. Like this was a holiday soup, but they were buying them for other reasons. And you can see that, but just by looking at the gift message, over 1,000 of these units were sold with a gift message that had something to do with get well, feel better, sorry you got sick over the holidays, whatever it is. And as a marketer, that gives me a tactical piece of information that I can extract, and then I can put that into my marketing activities as far as targeting things, or I might rejigger a product collection or whatever it is. Other things that were part of this task were diving into familial relationships. Hey, mom, hey, dad, hey, brother, hey, boss. So you can figure out what the relationships between the customers are, which opens up a whole field of opportunity for expansion. Personal chatbots. This is an up and coming one, and sort of falls into the category of things you should be doing that you probably aren't. Who knows how many transcription assistants tried to join this meeting, but I'm getting on meetings that now will have 4, 5, or 6 of them hanging around. Within my coaching world, with permission, what I've started doing is I've built client level chatbots. So I transcribe everything. I have my calls, I have my coaching curriculum, and then I pull those into either a GPT or I pull them into another data structure so that I have client-based communications. It doesn't work that great, but it will. And I encourage everybody to be thinking about the way that they're approaching client interactions from a multimodal perspective. So you need to be collecting not just the client files and not just the client emails, but also think about those other client interactions and structuring the data such that when the chatbots really start coming to the fore, you can give them access on a selective basis to different sets of data. You can train them, and it gives essentially a second brain for your account management staff or whoever it is, because all of the account history is there, the previous interactions. You may be even able to test ideas on top of it. This is just an example of one that I built for one of my coaching clients. I call it Josh's Head. I love this one, and it actually has something to do with what I was saying earlier about that data stack. Think about all it takes to do project coordination, ideation, project management, feedback, approval cycles, all of these parts of the organization. And all of these things necessarily fall in that zone of amplification that I was describing earlier. These are the things you're good at. These are the things that you were hired to do, right? And most of us spend a ton of our time in these lengthy processes because there are a lot of work packets that have to happen in between. But look at your content calendar, look at your project calendar, and think about ways that you can shorten these cycles. If you can use visual output LLM like Midjourney to concept a whole bunch of ideas and bring those to the table in the first meeting, is it possible that you can get actionable information very, very early in the process such that you can go to production like within weeks? In the digital world, it can take 6 months or more to get a piece out the door. I'm seeing those cycles cut by 80% in some organizations. So how do you actually go about this stuff? Usually it starts with literacy, and that's where I'm spending a lot of my time, is just developing this form of basic literacy within organization. And then once the organization has some idea of what's going on, they have to figure out who the right people are that need to be around the table. Usually, I encourage organizations to choose people who have natural curiosity around this stuff over titles. You think you need the chief information officer, but it might be better to have a full stack dev who's been playing with this stuff on the weekends so that they can have a greater felicity with how to actually put stuff into action. You need to have rules. How are people using it? How are they allowed to using it? How are they allowed to use it? Are they putting client data out there in the wild? Again, GPT Teams is a good bet. Even so, don't put personally identifiable information into these tools. Just don't. Please don't. Not yet. Are people allowed to do this to amplify their jobs? I think they should. I'm an absolutist. So this is a great way to get more productivity out of people. But are they using bad tools, crappy tools? Are they using tools that will seep your data into the training model? All of these things you need to answer depending on your scale. What's the ROI? How are you going to determine ROI from the projects that you're pursuing? So if it's a customer service project, can we toss out all of the level 1 tickets? And does that mean that our time per ticket declines and there'll be a demonstratable ROI from that? And that's not just from a corporate governance perspective. You really want to be able to have people get their teeth into projects that work and yield results as quickly as possible. That helps the flywheel start turning. And that flywheel starts with some sort of an MVP. And you can hack these things together using GPTs within OpenAI. There are some pretty basic building block tools out there. I like to use Google Sheets that are tied into APIs such that you can string like different project ideas together. Things like I was talking about earlier with custom emails. The way I do that is I take like an export from Apollo or Zoom Info, I populate it, and then I run successive prompts on top of that without any real coding need. And then you iterate. You go from there. All right. So the overview is first just do it. Really, just get out there and start using these tools. All right. That's, I think, most important. Don't be afraid of the tools. Embrace them for specific tasks. Pay for the basic subscriptions. Get that 10 hours of time in so that you kind of feel the boundaries of them. and get some iterations in. A lot of caveats to this. We're not going to go through. We can go through in Q&A, but I like to remind people that this was April last year. This was state of the art less than 1 year ago. And now this is where we are. This is the worst this will ever get. And that is absolutely amazing that we went from that terrifying Will Smith, like hashed together thing to these adorable, completely fake puppies in less than a year. And it just demonstrates the pace of change and the possibility here. I mean, that's usable right as is, but imagine where this is going to be in another 6 months, 12 months from there. So that was very fast paced, but trying to match the format as much as I possibly can. And I really want to focus as much time on Q&A as I can. So I'm going to stop sharing there for a minute and we can dive into any sort of questions. This is sort of an AMA. I've touched all kinds of different industries with this. So, and I've seen the struggles. I think a question I get all the time is, you know, I'm doing X, Y, and Z. Am I really far behind? If you are doing anything, you are way ahead of the pack. So know that. But there are organizations that are really dedicating their time. On one extreme end, I have an organization that a large organization, $500 million, and every Wednesday, the owner, it's a personally owned billion-dollar company, every Wednesday is AI Wednesday, and all 1,700 people in the company are focused on AI projects and AI improvement. That is the farthest pegged over I've seen yet, but most companies are still just getting their feet wet.
That's awesome. Thanks, Kevin. Amazing presentation. Really appreciate that.
All in one breath, too.
I know, it was incredible. Like, you did a fantastic job. So Q&A, if any of you have questions, I know, Alan, you've got your hand up. So if you have other questions, you can throw them in the chat and we can kind of put a queue there. But Alan, if you want to unmute yourself and ask Kevin your question.
I greatly appreciate it, and a wonderful presentation. You really opened me up to a lot of things. I'm very much a novice AI user and have used it sparingly because I just want to find out what the legal ramifications are about that. Because I come from a professional recording background. I used to sing opera and I did voiceovers, commercials, and things like that also. So what you were just showing about Will Smith and, you know, the law on that, where is it, or are there boundaries now then put out about replicating and duplicating and creating content of people that do have professional images, voices like Morgan Freeman, that you say, you definitely cannot do this or you will be sued, and this is a gray area, and this, you have a green light to go into there. Is there any type of documentation out there like that?
So it's in the courts right now.
Yep.
Numerous copyright cases, several of which have already been tossed out, by the way. So we will have some more clarity on what it means for both the content creators and the use of those materials in the models. I would suspect in the next 6 to 12 months. However, there are from I'm going to focus on the business application versus the creator side, because that's a big can of worms that there isn't a great answer to, except the courts are going to figure it out. On a business liability side, platforms like Adobe and Adobe Photoshop have now licensed all of their inputs, and increasingly you'll see indemnification clauses, which are actually present in Adobe for sure, and also in some of the GPT plans as well, that they are basically asserting that they had the rights to use these materials. That might change, but I feel pretty comfortable from a business perspective using like Adobe tools and not particularly worrying about somebody coming after me for copyright.
Okay.
So what do we have next? Somebody choose a Kevin, share your contacts.
So Karen asked, are certain AI tools better for different industries, and how do you figure that out?
So it's also broad. It's happening so fast. And I'm like giddy about it, but I'm also it's overwhelming because it hasn't niched down it has a little and it will, but at the moment, like you're better off using the primary tools. And I don't want to be the hater against the 50,000 small companies that have started with like UX experience that are sitting on top of the various LLM APIs. They have some purpose of being, but I think most of them are just waiting to be munched up by the big platforms. And from a generic perspective, using the LLM directly is usually better than trying to use something bespoke unless you have a very good reason for it, or it's trained on some particular piece of data that you need. But I would also be very suspicious about somebody who's saying that they've trained a model on, I don't know, automotive insurance or whatever it is, if their last name isn't Altman or they haven't raised several $billions. It's just not very likely that whatever they're building is that useful yet. And then the other related point that I said in my little breakout earlier was the best AI for you to start with is likely the one that's built into the big incumbent platforms. So you can adopt some CRM that's doing cool stuff with direct media communication, but if you're already using HubSpot, I'd keep an eye on what HubSpot is doing as far as its AI tool set, or using Zapier to connect different things, or like in my world in D2C, Klaviyo is the dominant email service provider. Like they are building these tools. They understand their market really, really well, and they have the resources to build them out really rapidly. So the answer is yes, but you have to look within your own tech stack and see where the innovators are and lean into what you know first.
That's great advice. So Chad asked something similar in terms of picking winners for the current crop of AI tools, and then if you have suggestions on where to start on which tools. Like, do you go straight to GPT? Do you go to something else? What suggestions do you have?
So I'm becoming a bit of connoisseur of this. So one, there's a platform called Poe that if you're AI curious, I highly recommend that you start there, because what Poe allows you to do is for a single subscription, you get access to all of the models. So you can have Claude 3, you can have GPT-4, you can have Gemini Advanced, you can have all of the open source models, which from a dev perspective is great because you get to play with what the open source models can do. And you can compare back and forth. Now their models are arbitrage. You pay them $20, and then they have an API connection. So you'll tap out on usage if you're a power user, but for like testing out different things, it's great. To answer the question directly, it's an arms race. It changes every 5 internet minutes. And Claude Opus is currently the internet darling. It sounds more human. It's very accurate. It has outperformed GPT-4. Gemini, which are the Google suites, the Gemini Pro that is out there in the wild, has just an enormous context length. And I know there's a lot of jargon here, but just like you can dump an entire book into it and have a conversation about the book. But that's not out in the wild. It will be shortly. And it's not like Altman's going to sit around and let this happen as all the headlines are, ooh, GPT is no longer the best. We're going to see a GPT 4, 5, or 5 shortly. Yeah, so I those are the ones that are my go-to. I tend to use GPT-4 the most just as a workhorse, but I do appreciate the voice of Claude. And then anybody who is doing anything with marketing needs to experiment with Perplexity. Perplexity is a totally different model. It is an LLM, but it is basically re-indexed the entire internet. It's often confused that people think that it's using Google. No, it's re-indexed the internet, and it is an answer engine versus a suggestion engine. So Google's very good at giving you a whole bunch of stuff that you're supposed to graze on. Perplexity just gets you to the answer. And I've even put it's on my homepage of my phone. So whenever I have I need to Google it question, I instead use Perplexity. And the reason I do that is answers are cool, right? it sometimes doesn't get me where I need to be. But as a digital marketer, it is so important that you understand the direction that search is going and what that experience is going to look like in the future for consumers. Related to that, on a personal Gmail account, you can enable search generative experience, and within your own Gmail. So in Chrome, there's a little like vial thing. Click on that, and you can enable search generative experience, and that builds these tools. Google's versions of these tools directly into your Google search results. And it's a very different experience than what we're used to. And it's interesting to see that change day by day as Google figures out how to retain its $160 billion of search. Because they're not going to let that go lightly. They're not going to be like, cool, we'll move on, we'll do something else. So I expect great things from Google.
Awesome. And thanks for putting that link in, Maxwell, to Poe. Another question from Chad. What would you say are the top 3 mistakes people are making with AI?
Yeah. One, they go too big. They're like they try and solve some massive problem within their organization before they build a culture of solving problems and the little wins. I just posted a piece today about the pyramid of suck, and like the idea is that you think about the sort of things you want to solve. The very base level of the pyramid is like things that suck, things that people don't like to do. Solve those problems first, because you're removing friction within your world, you're creating efficiency, and ideally you're getting people into their zone of genius. And once you've solved a lot of those problems, people are like, wow, the ROI on this is that I don't have to do all this crap that I really hate about my job. So now I can spend more time marketing or thinking about clients or whatever it might be. And then the next tier are things that you're not good at. So I'm a terrible graphic designer, but I'm now liberated from the chains of having to go to Upwork or Fiverr for graphic design, and now I can produce things. And only once you have these sort of things within your organization established should you start looking at the bigger picture. So that's one mistake. Another mistake is pretending that policy matters as far as adoption. The bigger the company is, the more illicit use of these tools is going on. And just trying to policy your way out of that is a mistake. You need to educate people. You need to make sure that they have the right tools in their hand that offer the right sort of data protections, and that you're encouraging them in a very open way to share the wins of amplification. So they're not just like on the sly using GPT to do their job, and they think it's a win. Like, no. We got to bring this out of the shadows and make sure that people know how to use it properly. The others in tools, all of these paid tools. Remember, if something's free, it's not, right? So people are adopting tools that are free, and that means either they're using a really crappy model that probably isn't giving very good results, or they're monetizing you in some way, shape, or form. And we would have all been much, much, much more careful about this in previous iterations of tech, and there'd be more vetting, but it's like the Wild West. And you've got like, people are adopting this platform and that platform and giving it access to this and that without having any idea what it's doing and what it's accessing. So we're going to see some real nasty stories about that down the line, I think. So yeah, those are the list goes on, but like this is all 80%. I didn't say that in the presentation, but we're at an 80% level. I think the last mistake is that people assume that it's 100% like great. And I'm of the perspective that if you can get from 0 to 80% and with very little lift, that's a huge win. People get disappointed because humans have high expectations, I guess, that it doesn't do everything for them, and they get frustrated. Well, that output was crap. Well, okay, but you were trying to make it do your entire job. How about just focus on ideation or focusing on amplifying the things that you're already doing to get you to a place where you're better off for doing the rest of your job? Don't expect it to do the whole thing. That might come in a few years, but we're not there yet.
Great. That is great advice. I like the breaking it up approach. There are questions coming in fast on the chat. So Kevin asked about the ownership of who owns the output of content when you've used AI to generate it. Do you have any insight on that, Kevin, or is it kind of still the same as what you were saying? It's up in the air in the courts?
So by owning, well, there are a couple of different things. Copyright law is very unestablished here. So there are already some legal decisions that have come down as far as the copyright ability of AI outputs and whether or not you can truly copyright them. UK, you definitely can't patent items that have come out of AI yet. So it's shifting sands, and you have to decide if you're okay with sort of unsettled laws for those outputs. As far as use of those outputs, so use is an interesting sort of air quoted term because the way that the way that the LLM companies want to use your material is in terms of training. And in the free models, or like GPT 3.5, or even in the paid GPT-4, or most of the rest, yeah, you're gonna put in a bunch of data, you're going to do a bunch of interesting stuff, you're gonna course correct. All of the things you're doing in there are going back into the training model. And although I think that the direct risk of something that's business critical being pulled out of an LLM from the consumer input side is relatively remote, it could be in there somewhere. And you need to be aware of that. So the third time, GPT teams, at least they are making the promise that your data isn't going to go back the other direction. You do need to be careful on the API side if you're doing your own dev and make sure that you're using the right API connections such that it's not going to be used for training. But man, there's going to be all the lawyer. Everybody says that lawyers are going to be eliminated. Yes, they probably are, but a lot of them are going to get really rich off of this in the meantime. So go lawyers.
We've got time for a couple of other questions here. One from John Minnick. Good to see you, John. It's a fairly in-depth question. Do you want to come off mute and give us a little context of what you're asking?
Yeah, thank you, Taylor and Kevin. I'm really enjoying this discussion. As we go out to certain investors, particularly in Europe, we're finding we're running into this wall of sort of the negative potential impacts of implementing AI in our organization, specifically some of the negative implications of workforce displacement. And I'm just wondering if that's something you feel comfortable commenting on. I mean, how do we balance this fact of that we want to implement this, but also know that culturally and for other reasons, our stakeholders and our investors come in with a certain set of values of their own.
So I'm comfortable yet uncomfortable a little bit because I have, as a father of two teenagers, I am considerably concerned about where things are going to land for them as they enter the professional world, right? The news of Klarna, this was like 3 weeks ago, the CEO, who may have an EQ problem because he did this publicly, came out and announced that by eliminating 700 jobs, they not only increased their NPS, their Net Promoter Score, but they also saved $45 million. Wasn't necessarily the most politically correct thing to do, but it is happening everywhere and the larger companies. You're seeing it at the FANG companies for sure, as their profits are soaring and they're laying off tens of thousands of people. They're embracing various forms of AI. So disruption is here. I think I'm feeling better about a recession being farther off than I would have thought a year ago. But I can promise you that as soon as a recession is looming, that's when you're going to see these massive changes in workforce, and it will start in areas like customer service that are largely automatable, and expand into essentially anything that is data moving from one side of a desk to the other side of the desk. Those are all going to go away. And I mean, unequivocally, there is almost no place in the organization for that sort of work in another 2, 3, 5 years, depending on the organization. Where I differ a little bit with the the negative perspective on that is I do believe that everybody has zones of genius, and getting people to their zone of genius and understanding what that looks like from an entity engineering and a human engineering perspective, that you are unlocking huge amounts of productivity. What can you do with that productivity? How do you reapply these people, or at least the people who are interested in being engaged in this? It's the whole quote that goes around, it won't be AI that takes your job. It's going to be somebody who understands AI. Is becoming almost a trope, right? But if people are going to lean into it, where else can they be deployed in the environment? And how much productivity can you gain? How many more projects a quarter can you take on because of these tools? That's going to cap out too. So that doesn't just, you don't get infinite productivity. At some point, you just introduce so much complexity into an organization that, yes, you freed all of these people who were doing these other things, and now they're focused on new things, but you just sort of cap out on your ability to execute or your client's ability to absorb on the other side. So you'll see even very progressive organizations who are making stated claims that they want to retain everybody. They'll start casting off people as well. Europe will be interesting to watch this way for sure. I mean, I suspect that it's going to take policy involvement to figure out what happens as people are being cast off, because the productivity gains are real, and you can't just retain people when your international competitors are not and can gain margin on you. So, long philosophical conversation to be had there, I think, but it's going to be interesting for sure.
Awesome. Kevin, thanks so much. We're out of time for today, but I think Hannah will be sending out the presentation to all of the attendees, and it will have Kevin's contact information. I think I saw on one of the slides. So please look for that email from Hannah. And Kevin, really appreciate it. This was amazing. Great presentation. Thanks everybody for coming and your questions, and look forward to seeing you all next week.
And I'm happy to hang out here too, if anybody wants to continue the AMA. Like, I love this stuff, so.
Cool.
AMA.
Yeah, we've got 7 minutes if you want to hang for a few more minutes and ask some questions of Kevin. I'll keep the room open until the top of the hour.
Cool. Anybody?
Maxwell had a question about what the cost of Perplexity is if he's using the free version.
Well, it just sort of sucks. The cost is your time and your accuracy. It's okay, and it's good to get, if you're just after the experience of an answer engine, it's fine, but the paid version is notably better. Yeah, the paid is $20 a month. I mean, this is what I'm doing, so I subscribe to a lot of stuff. So
I was gonna say, how many subscriptions are you on? If, like, I'm assuming ChatGPT Plus and a few more.
So I try not to like accumulate them. Like, I used to have 11 Labs and HeyGen for the video production, but I wasn't really doing much with that, so I let those go. Really, I maintain 5 or 6. GPT. I do Anthropic, so Claude. I also do Poe because I have need to look at Mixtral and some of the other open source models for certain projects. Then I use Shortwave for email, which is awesome as far as a time unlock. It's AI enabled email. It's $20 a month. Everything's $20 a month, like, pretty much, unless you get into like proposal software land, which looks like it can be like thousands of dollars a month, which is endlessly annoying to me. Somebody needs to undercut those guys. Maybe it'll be me. I don't know.
What about Pi? Have you ever interacted with Pi?
Yeah, it's funny. I was playing with Pi just last week. One of my coaching clients had said that they were using it, and I felt threatened as a coach. So I felt like I had to like scope out the competition. Pi is weird, just from a technical perspective. People really like it. It's been fine-tuned the way that feels more human to people, but it has a very small context window. It's only like 5,000 tokens. So like I'm not quite sure what the mojo is. If you want to interact with the thing for too long, it's going to start misfiring and doing weird things just from a technical perspective. But I just started playing with it a little bit, and yeah, like uh, I'm stressed today. Help me out.
Hmm.
A use case with generating leads. Yeah. So it's more executing on leads. I really, 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 truly hate all of the AI lead generation tools. Most of them are completely full of it, and they've just scraped, and they are really inaccurate. And if you are leaning your business on using those, you better be using a list cleaner of some kind to make sure you don't have dead leads. Because if you are sending to those, you are going to get spam boxed, and it's never going to work for you. So those have a ways to come. But I personally use Apollo is my go-to, and the way that I apply this. So I own two different operating companies that are LLM type companies. One is a letter writing business. Usually I have one. I do. Yeah. So it's called Inkworks. How this about being meta. I mash up CRM data to create customized messaging, and then I use a handwriting plotter to output handwritten letters. So it's like a Bic pen. It's a robot Bic pen that's writing a personalized message. So don't trust anything that you see. But I'm doing a lot of cold outreach with that one, and I'm doing it as I described. So I'm using a GPT Sheets plugin. So kind of ghetto. And the Sheets plugin connects to the API, and I take my Apollo export and I put that in the first 10 columns, and that has name, title, company, whatever. And then I run a prompt on the URL from that sheet that then populates a new field in the sheet for what this company does. Inkworks does handwritten letters, yada, yada, yada. And then I add a final prompt on that is name, title, mash up with what the company does, make personal email for them, and then outputs at the back end. Then it breaks because none of the ESPs are set up to actually deliver that sort of email. So I have a very lovely fellow named Alex in the Philippines who does that manually for me, thousands and thousands of times a day. Gemini. Oh, Gemini versus Microsoft. I think this is great. Boy, they're moving slow. This is why I like a shortwave. The shortwave is where this is going to be, and it's so cool to use the thing and like see it like accelerate your email and whatever. And like Gemini and Microsoft know everything about you, Google and Microsoft, so they are so well positioned to do this. But the tools are still really clunky. You're not going to. There are Microsoft people and there are Google people, and you're not going to convince one to change unless it's Excel. Like I'm a Google person except for Excel because I can't stand Google Sheets. So it's kind of the universe you're operating in. They do want to charge a bunch of money for it, and I don't think that the tools are well enough baked yet, such that you can get like super usable output. So at least at this stage, I tell most people you're better off just operating within the LLM themselves. However, Gemini is every bit as good as GPT-4. So like that's not a problem anymore. They both put out really, really good output. Just sort of choose your poison. There's Apollo IO, yeah. Perplexity,
Awesome.
yeah, Perplexity citations. That's really cool. Let's see.
Kevin, we've got to jump to host another meeting.
All
But
right.
really appreciate this. Thank you. Phenomenal. Thank you so much. This is awesome.
It's so much to cram into like such a short amount of time.
You did a phenomenal job. I think
better,
hopefully people will reach out to you with questions, but yeah, really appreciate you doing this. It was awesome.
Okay.
This
Well,
is
happy
great.
to help.
Okay. Thanks, Kevin.
Thanks, guys.
We'll
Bye.
see y'all later.